I guess my point on this is if you don't like John Ball, then you. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Office Hours presented by Holderness Bourne. I am your host, Michael Wolf. Today we're going to talk about the 2023 Open Championship. It's being held at Hoylake. Before we get to all that stuff, though, we're going to start with a little confession. All right. A couple episodes back, I may have told the class that the Masters was my favorite tournament of the year. That was a lie, right? We were early in the semester. I was trying to, win the favor of my students. I was trying to tell them what I thought they wanted to hear. That was a lie. My favorite tournament is the Open Championship.
Yeah, we knew that, Mr. Wolfie. I could tell.
It's sweater weather sometimes. It's really long days. I don't do split tees in the early rounds. It's pot bunkers. It was Peter Alice when I was growing up. It's not fair that 3 of the 4 major championships are held in the United States. So this is kind of our one chance to see what the heck's going on out there in other parts of the world. And some wacky characters always show up that aren't household names, at least here in the United States. So Open Championship, as true to its name, it's still open, very much like the United States Open. Anybody can play in the thing. They give out their spots a little bit differently than we do than the USGA does for our Open here in the United States. They like to think of the Open as kind of the rest of the world Open, that basically it's not just for the UK or for Great Britain, it's really the Open for the whole world. And their qualifying reflects that, so good on them. So your regular tour players here in the United States, in other tours around the world, you can earn a spot in the Open Championship by finishing high in one of the 15 different events in 10 different countries. They do still have open qualifying, so about 2,500 pros and amateurs will try it. They have 15 regional qualifiers. You advance to 4 qualifying sites, all to try to get into to try to play Liverpool.
Yeah, can I ask you a question? Because
sure.
I've confused Andy Murray. I've called him British. I've called him Scottish. Naming is important across the pond. When should I call it Hoylake and when should I call it Royal Liverpool? And does it matter or does it not matter? You can call them either.
Yeah. So I'm an American. I'm a dumb American about this stuff. I think Hoylake is a pretty good way to refer to the golf course. It's the ground that is played on is Hoylake. Royal Liverpool would describe the golf club, I think. So if you're going to the pro shop, that is run by a pro who's employed by Royal Liverpool Golf Club, and so he's going to sell stuff that usually says Royal Liverpool on it. The menus in the clubhouse and stuff say Royal Liverpool, whereas when you go out on the golfing grounds, I think you would refer to the golf course as Hoylake.
Okay.
I think that's the general rule of thumb with these places. A lot of the places in England too, they would have, like in Scotland, they would have multiple clubs sometimes that would be use the same golf course. In England, there was kind of a tradition of a working man's club that would have their own little clubhouse that was not nearly as grand, but had some, in the way they would kind of earn their rights to use the same golf course, and those were called artisans clubs.
Okay.
And you can still see some of their cool little clubhouses today. Some of them are still around. In this area of Hoylake, there's still quite a few artisans clubs.
I'll be on the lookout for that.
Yeah. Artisans clubs are usually they're the good places to drink a beer afterwards. Those are the fun places. If you want to do the snooker and the see all the fancy oil portraits. And by the way, Hoylake has some unbelievable oil portraits hanging on the wall. We'll flash a couple of them up here. They got a club secretary that posed for an oil portrait with an all-time suit on, black and white checkered suit. You don't see a lot of black and white checkerboard suits anymore.
I think a life goal of mine is to have an oil painting painted of myself wearing an animal shirt.
Sure. I think that would fit in.
Super well done oil painting of me looking like an idiot would be something that would make me chuckle if it ended up in my basement or something.
Sure. Hey, you know what I would like an oil painting of? Me wearing my great Holderness Bourne sweater. I love that. It's 104 degrees today in Birmingham, Alabama, where I'm currently residing and taping this podcast. It's 104 degrees outside.
Heat dome.
Yeah, I wore this sweater because I want you guys to see how awesome this thing is.
Is that the Ward or the Betts?
This is the Ward, Harvey Ward, named after the great Harvey Ward. He won the British Amateur in 1952. Not many Americans have won British Amateurs lately. Harvey Ward won it. I like this sweater because it's a good weight. and it's classy looking. Like everything Holderness and Bourne does, they don't get crazy with their sweaters. It's just a good, solid. This is Heathered Atlantic, the Heathered Atlantic color. It's a crew neck, sleeves. Again, nothing crazy, but just enough of a little
the diamond knit.
Yeah, diamond knit to it to set it off just a little bit. Not enough that like in 3 years, if you buy it, everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, that's the sweater from 3 years ago that with diamond knit." It's very understated. It's perfect for going in the clubhouse at Royal Liverpool or any other place over there. And it's a perfect weight, I think, for a little chilly in the afternoon. You throw it on. It gets you, takes care of you on the back nine. You're not going to break out sweating if it, if the wind dies down a little bit. It's, the word sweater from Holderness and Bourne, and can't thank those guys enough for sponsoring the class. That's for sure.
The Ward sweaters are probably our best-selling piece of apparel in the NLU Pro Shop. I actually have on the long sleeve Abbott polo, which I would highly recommend. Very, very good stuff. Shout out to H&B. Can you tell me, like, what does it mean to have the name Royal in the name of your golf course in the UK?
Yeah, so royal means that you have a patron from the royal family that is a patron of your club or a supporter of your club. It could be any golf course that was really in the sphere of British influence. So you had Royal Calcutta, you had Royal Adelaide, you had Royal Melbourne. So it was really any of them that were still under the Queen's. I guess the Commonwealth is what you would call it. It's marketing. They give out the royal title. There's the royal butter. There's the royal coat maker. There's a royal shoemaker. You see it all over. You go to London, like people advertising, royal this, royal that. In golf, it was basically you had somebody that could get to the Queen or get to one of their people and write them a nice letter saying, "Hey, can we be a royal club?"
What about Hoylake? Do you feel like that's an earned royal title?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that question, Neil. It is Neil, right?
It is, yeah. I was in your 201 lecture.
I remember you from the last class. So let's start with a quick review. I think that's maybe the easiest way to do it. We go back 1859. Allen Robertson is the GOAT of golf. He is undisputedly the best golfer. He dies 1859. Everybody naturally wants to know, okay, who's the GOAT now? Who's the next? Couple twists and turns. We arrive. Open Championship is going to be held at Prestwick in October of 1860 to decide basically who succeeds Allen Robertson as the king of golf. It's going to be 3 rounds played over their 12-hole course. Prestwick was 12 holes at the time. So they play 36 holes. 8 guys show up to play. Willie Park Sr. beats Old Tom Morris by 2 shots to win the original championship belt.
Did they actually have a belt?
They had a belt, sure. It's the belt that young Tom Morris made. We'll get to that, Neil.
Okay.
So the first 8 opens are an absolute slugfest. Old Tom Morris wins 4 of them. He's the runner-up in 2. Willie Park Sr. wins 3 of them. He's the runner-up in 4 of them. So it's pretty much Old Tom, Willie Park Sr. until 1968 when the Golden Boy arrives. That is the son of Tom Morris, young Tom Morris. Catchy name. He's 17 years old. Yeah, the kid.
He's like the original kid.
He is like the original kid. He is. I don't know if he ever went to Myrtle Beach, but he is the original kid. He shows up. He's 17 years old. He's the first one to, put backspin on the ball.
Ooh, he's spinning it back, just flexing on people.
Sure, makes an eagle, makes a 3 on the first hole at Prestwick, which was no easy task back in the day. Young Tom wins 4 straight, 1868 through 1872. Everybody knows the story. Plenty of books, one mediocre movie written about it. Tommy dies on Christmas Day, 1875. He's still the youngest kid ever to win a major championship. 17 years old, still the youngest. He's the only man to win 4 straight of any of the 4 modern, what we consider majors. Only guy to win 4 in a row. So that's Scotland. All is well. The English want to get in the game, right? Some of them are vacationing up in Scotland. They come home. They want to play golf. They're turning into sickos. They want to form golf on their own. That's where Royal Liverpool comes in. So Royal Liverpool, it is not the very first golf course in England. There are a couple others, but really the first one that is like by Englishmen, for Englishmen. These guys all agree, and they're in the Liverpool area, and they agree that, hey, we're gonna form.
Hold on, Mr. Wolfie, you got to slow down for me. I got a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Were the Scottish cool with the RNA or with the English guys, trying to get involved, or was there a rivalry between the English and the Scottish?
Well, we'll give the abbreviated version of that in the interest of not having this a 6-hour long. I know you got places to be, Neil. You probably got to get to football practice.
Yeah, we got passing league tonight.
The short answer is that no. Royal Wimbledon, and then some gentlemen down at Royal St. George's down on the English coastline. There was definitely a push by some of them. Laidlaw Purvis is a pretty cool name of a very interesting guy. He thought essentially that golf should be controlled by, the guys in London, because that was kind of the center of the UK at the time. And he said, why are we letting this little village up in St. Andrews, Scotland, control things when the future should be just going to be a big deal. This game, then it should be in London, just like the headquarters for tennis or rugby or anything else. He obviously was not successful in that. The St. Andrews guys kind of beat that back, and that's a long. It's a good story. It's a long one. We'll cover that. We'll cover that in another class. But
Okay.
Good question. Yeah. So back to the English. What Hoylake had going for it is, so Hoylake is just outside of Liverpool, right? That's important because back then Liverpool was a big deal. It had the money. It was a trading hub. It had people from kind of coming and going. It was big in shipbuilding, and so when Hoylake was formed, when it became Royal Liverpool, some of the people that were involved in it were people like Balfour and a couple of the Foreman brothers. These were guys who were not just did they in a lot of cases they were Scotsmen or Englishmen who had spent time in Scotland learning the game, and they wanted to bring this to England, kind of the best parts of what they considered the game in Scotland, as far as the pace of play and the layouts of the courses and stuff.
Do you think that's because there more land there? It was like, why didn't that happen in London? Because I still got to think there's more money in London, and it sounds like that was where they wanted the RNA to be.
Yeah. I think it was probably because somewhat because of location. I think it was Liverpool was on the coast. It was links land was right there. Good links land. I mean, just around Liverpool, there's you've got Birkdale, you've got St. Lytham and Anns. So you got 3 rota courses that are all within 15 miles or 20 miles of each other. But there's 5 or 6 other great courses there as well. It's one of those places when you're riding around, like, and you look out the car window when you're there, every empty lot looks like you could build a great golf course there. It's just that it's that dunes land that looks like it's built for golf.
Okay.
And so I think it's in relation to London, why there versus London. I think it's location. It's a lot closer, by the way, to St. Andrews, or it was back then, than London was.
So money, but combined with almost like the right kind of land and proximity to Scotland. It almost feels like the happy medium of everything. Taking the best parts of the money from London, taking the best, like the most similar land and proximity to Scotland, and almost like a clean slate. Let's fire up some links. Golf.
Yeah, I think
baby.
so. It also helped that they had really, really good golfers early on. So Hoylake was the birth of the Amateur Championship. It was not RNA. It was not St. Andrews. The amateurs were first. A separate championship for amateurs. Hoylake is definitely the thought of as like the birthplace of amateur competitive golf. So they hosted the first amateur championship in 1885. Hoylake hosted the first international team match between Great Britain and Scotland. They hosted the first match that eventually became like the Walker Cup, when the guys from America were coming over to play in the amateur. Hoylake was the ones that got the idea to say, hey, while these guys are here, like, why don't our best play against their best and, see how it turns out. It all started with a guy named John Ball Jr.
Ah, that guy.
Hoylake, the Hoylake Club, or where the golf course is today, at the time was a horse racetrack. So the owner of the tavern, or the boarding house where these guys got together to organize what became Royal Liverpool, was run by John Ball's father. So John Ball Jr. Took up golf from day one. He was he was a baller. He won his first amateur in 1888. But the biggest thing that John Ball did was he inspired the rest of the great golfers. So a lot of maybe the big names that you hear in English golf from the early days, that you kind of heard them, but you're not sure kind of where they fit in everything. J.H. Taylor, James Braid, Harold Hilton, and then eventually Harry Vardon. All of those guys were like 10 years younger than John Ball was. So John Ball was one that really inspired him. And the big thing that he did to inspire them and like change golf forever was he won the Open Championship in 1890. He was 28 years old. He was the first Englishman to ever win the Open Championship. He was the first amateur to ever win the Open Championship. And he was, by all accounts, a good dude too, which probably helped. The guy wins 8 British amateurs, Neil, And that's at a time when there's only basically two big tournaments. It's the Open and it's the Amateur Championship. And you got a lot of really good...
He never went pro.
He never went pro. He never went pro. No.
Wow. So it sounds like young Tom was the kid,
yep.
and John Ball Jr. is like the man. Like come with me, team captain. Kind of instills a competitive mindset in the Hoylake squad. Everyone wants to be a baller, basically.
I would say so. I mean, I think that inspiration is, our friend Stephen Proctor, who, has been on Net Laying Up before, he wrote The Long Golden Afternoon. I would strongly urge anybody assigned reading. But back in the old days when it was just the Open and the Champion in the Amateur were the big thing, these guys were ballers. And he was really the one that inspired all that. So you got J.H. Taylor. He wins 5 Opens. James Braid wins 5 Opens. Harold Hilton wins 2 Opens. He wins 4 British Ams. He wins a US Am. And then obviously the great man himself, Harry Vardon, winner of the 1900 US Open and 6 Open Championships. Still the record holder. He's the only guy who's won 6 Open titles.
Okay. So he was like the next generation.
That's next generation. And all of this was happening basically, around Hoylake and, the big tournaments were being held there.
Well, hold on. I mean, you're riding for this guy, John Ball Jr., which is a sweet name, by the way. What did he do for a living? Did he make money off of golf? Sounds like he amateur his whole life. I mean, he's got to fund his habit, right?
Yeah, stayed an amateur his whole life. A gentleman for sure, but not not somebody who was born into the upper class of society. I mean, his dad operated a boarding house, but polite, well-spoken, well-mannered, and maybe early proof that being really, really good at golf can open a lot of doors for you too. And to his dying day, I think just respected.
It's a bummer he wasn't able to start like big baller brand like the modern day Ball family.
Sure. Put some merch out, some John Ball Jr. merch.
That's neither here nor there. Let me ask you this, and please, don't get mad at me, Mr. Wolfie, but Which one is Hoylake? Sometimes I get all these links courses mixed up.
Very understandable. So Birkdale is the one with the funny clubhouse, right? That looks like a wedding cake.
Okay.
The white clubhouse. That one is probably the one that the professional golfers today like the most. Golf there is kind of played through the dunes, like around the dunes. The course routes kind of, in between the dunes with relatively flat fairways. And I think because of that, the modern pros a little bit split, they think it's the fairest, which I hate that word. Yeah,
there's less rub of the green.
A little bit less rub of the green. You've got Lytham, right? Lytham has the kind of cool looking clubhouse, and it also has the dormy house right next door to the clubhouse with like the cool woodwork around the ceiling and stuff. It's probably the one that's famous for. So it starts with a par 3, right? It's the only championship course I can think of that starts with a par 3 first hole. Hoylake is the one. So Hoylake's the one where Tiger won, where it was all brown. It's the one that Rory won on the last time it was played here. Hoylake is probably the least photogenic for television. It's pretty flat, or at least it's not flat. That's not fair. But its bumps are they're rolls. They're 6 feet high. Birkdale has 40 feet high, 30 feet high, dunes that photograph well. Hoylake is more baked out. It looks like St. Andrews, to be honest. It's bumps. The pros don't necessarily love it for that. A lot of times for that reason, where you're hitting a drive and it's kind of rolling along and bumping along. It's got the pot bunkers where the balls, will funnel into the bunker. So the bunkers play much larger than their size, because you really don't want anything within like 10 feet of the bunkers, or they're all going to funnel into the bunkers. But yeah, so for most people, this is the one where Tiger played it, and it was dark. The turf was basically all burned out.
Does it have a lot of bunkers compared to other open courses? More bunkers?
It's got a lot. Lytham has the most, but it's got a lot. Hoylake's also the one where if you play as a tourist, the first hole has the out of bounds to the right. It has the internal out of bounds, with architectural junkies love to debate. For the Open, the members' 17th and 18th holes are played as the first and second holes for the pros. So the pros will essentially play 17 and 18 as 1 and 2. The turf conditions, the bounce of the turf at Hoylake, and the wind is everything. They've hosted 12 Opens, and the scores are all over the place depending on how firm the turf is and how the wind blows that day. It is, it's one of those golf courses that is very exposed to the wind. And because of that, they don't set it up super tough because you don't know if the wind's going to come up.
How do you think it's going to hold up against par?
That's a good question, Neil. As you probably know, and you're antagonizing the professor right now, I don't care about par. The folks at Hoylake didn't care about par either, which we'll do a quick aside on this because I think it's very instructive for American listeners. So Fred Daly wins the 1947 Open at Hoylake. That's notable for two reasons. One, because he was the first Irishman to ever win an Open championship. The second reason I love the 1947 Open, though, is because par was set at 68 for the 1947 Open.
How dare they? How dare they, Mr.
Well,
Wolfie?
they got to the golf course. It was playing pretty firm, and the R&A in its wisdom just said, well, we'll just shorten a couple of the par fives that, maybe would be unfair to play as par fours. But we're going to shorten a couple of par fives and just call it a day, and we're going to set par at 68. The weather comes up, and it turns tough. It's right on the water, so they don't know day to day what the weather's going to be really. The 36-hole cut is plus 20, and Fred Daly wins the golf tournament with a winning score of plus 21. And I find that refreshing because who cares? I mean, it doesn't matter what he was better than everybody else that week. Who cares if it was a par 68 or if it was a par 72? Really doesn't matter. If it had been a par 72, the winning score would have been plus 5. The fact that it's plus 21, I think, is kind of funny.
Man,
play them all as par fours.
Something there. What if they added in to all pro events, where they move the pins around? What if they move par around every day? Friday, hey, it's a 69 today. We're going back to 73 for Saturday. And just letting everyone know the night before when the pin sheet comes out, the par sheet comes out too.
Neil, it sounds like you've been reading some of Mike Davis's old term papers. I believe that was tried one time by the USGA recently. They had a par 4 and par 5 that they switched day to day, and
it didn't go well.
Players didn't love it.
So I got a confession. I'm actually going to the Open this year, so I'll be in Liverpool. I don't know anything about Liverpool, but it sounds like there's some really good golf there. Why St. Andrews in Scotland or Carnoustie before going to why haven't I thought about Liverpool as a avid golfer?
Yeah, I think they maybe haven't embraced the tourism as much as St. Andrews did. I think St. Andrews was pretty early on decided to align themselves with tourism and playing. St. Andrews had the ability to do that because the course was was basically public golf course, right? The links. There's 7-8 golf courses there now that are all huddled around and pretty easy for relatively speaking for tourists to play. The clubs along the coast of Liverpool and to the north of Liverpool they're all private clubs, but it's a great place for a vacation for golf. You can play 7-8 really good courses that we just talked about without changing hotels.
What about the vibe of the city? I mean, are we talking? Is this a blue collar city? Is this a
It's a blue collar city. Liverpool seems like a pretty good place to get your ass kicked if you're not careful. I think a lot of it depends on the economy, and that's the other thing, Neil, that I think is very important for people to understand. I think Americans, when we think of England, right? You think of, basically you think of Winston Churchill standing on, the balcony of Buckingham Palace, flashing the V for victory sign.
Cheers.
Yeah, in 1945. And then the next thing that you can think of in England was Princess Di getting married in 1981 or 1980, whenever that was. In between, the United States was go-go years, and especially for golf. I mean, it was the 60s, the 70s. Robert Trent Jones and the Fonz are throwing up golf courses left and right, and everybody's buying, condos in Florida. In England, they were dead broke for an entire generation after the war. We got to remember they were in the war a long time before we were, and even their cities, experienced it firsthand with bombing and stuff like that. I think 3 bombs fell on Hoylake, but it affected their golf as well. When gasoline is expensive and it's being rationed all through the 50s and 60s, you're not joining 5 different golf clubs. You're not taking buddies trips. When it comes to Hoylake, there was the serious doubts at times of whether they were going to be able to host future opens in this period in the 1960s, 70s, trying to scrape up, a couple of £1,000 so they could host these championships and get the parking that was needed and put up fencing and, redecorate their clubhouse, which hadn't had the carpet replaced in 20 years. It was really individual guys that had to step up.
Well, I always like it, Mr. Wolfie, when you have those fun facts. You got any more of those fun facts?
I got a lot of fun facts. As far as Liverpool, Liverpool itself, so it's hosted 12 Opens. Birkdale's had 10, Lissom's had 11, and Hoylake's had 12. So Hoylake in a slight lead there. That's a little misleading because Hoylake has also had 18 amateur titles. So they have held more amateurs than anybody. They've still had more than St. Andrews has had. So another fun fact, Bobby Jones wins the 1930 Open at Hoylake on his way to winning the Grand Slam, right? That's the big story. Here's the fun fact, though. Jones gets done playing, right? He goes and finds Harold Hilton and then says, hey, I want to, ask you a question about John Ball Jr. John Ball Jr. is one of my heroes, Bobby Jones says. And, I never got to meet the guy. The times I was in the same place as he was for a tournament or whatever, it just never worked out. Can you tell me, about John Ball Jr.? I'd like to know more about John Ball Jr. And Hilton says, well, John Ball Jr. is here today. He's upstairs at the pro shop right now, hanging out in the top of the pro shop. Like, let's go meet him. And Bobby Jones is like kind of stunned and says, wait, what? He's here? Like the great man himself, by now, John Ball Jr.'s got some, some years on him. He's a little bit standoffish, I guess. So, and Jones knows this. So he's a little bit nervous about, walking up the stairs, and they go up the stairs and there's this great scene that's described in this book. Mighty Wins, Mighty Champions. It's one of the club histories of Royal Liverpool. And it's a pretty good one. This is like a $20 book, $30 book. Jones goes up and he meets John Ball Jr. finally, and he asks him, and takes a little while for the conversation. And Hilton's trying to kind of prompt John Ball Jr. to talk to him a little bit. And in response to one of the questions, John Ball Jr. Answers Bobby Jones and says, "Mr. Jones, you play a game with which I'm not familiar." And I like that story because that's, of course, the line that Bobby Jones used 30 years later when talking to a young Jack Nicklaus at Augusta when Jack Nicklaus goes and seeks out Bobby Jones at Augusta, and Jones repeats the line to Jack Nicklaus 30 years later. So
how about
I think
that?
That's the kind of nice link in history that I didn't know anything about in any of the stories about Bobby Jones and Jack Nicklaus until reading that book about Hoylake and John Ball Jr. So pretty cool stuff.
Wolfie, thanks for putting up with me again. Appreciate you helping me out getting these credits, and I learned a lot today. Thank you.
Neil, any friend of English golf is a friend of mine, as long as you also like John Ball Jr.
Hell yeah. I gotta study
Harry
up on
Varden.
my guy, JBJ.
Wait till we get to Harry Varden. That's a graduate level class, but good stuff. Thanks for coming in for office hours.
Always.